paper in 2008 and launching the Bitcoin software in 2009. So.
But what is it then? Can you explain really easily how does it work?
Yeah, I think so, because for example, just like I was talking about, the first thing we have to keep in mind to avoid these misconceptions is that Bitcoin was not the creation of a single mind, you know, this guy or this woman just created Bitcoin out of nothing, you know. People have been discussing the idea on how to create a digital cash for more than 25 years. I mean, right now we have digital, before Bitcoin we have digital songs, digital videos, but we did not have digital money. So what Bitcoin is...
Well, we did have digital money.
I mean, sorry, not digital cash. I mean, money that behaves like cash on the internet. So Bitcoin is basically that. It's peer-to-peer cash system. And it can be considered cash in this point because it's pseudonymy in its nature. You can use it as freely as money, you know. It's much less bureaucratic in this sense. You can avoid many of the bureaucratic factors of other forms of money.
How does Bitcoin differ from the traditional or the former digital currency system?
Yeah, it's very interesting because we are going to discuss it later, of course, because due to the nature of its technology, you can have the service without the service provider. So Bitcoin is the first form of money that do not depend on any trust entity to work. So Bitcoin embeds in itself, in its technology, both the central bank aspects of money and the payment processor. So
you mean you can exchange money without a bank?
Yes, that's it.
I mean,
it's peer-to-peer in this sense. The technology created by Satoshi Nakamoto, the very famous buzzword right now, called blockchain, this technology made possible to generate consensus in distributed networks. So the blockchain technology behind Bitcoin, I'm going to explain it specifically for the case of Bitcoin. It works a bit like a common shared database. And it's very interesting because anyone can upload new information. I mean, the person who is going to upload this database is randomly selected throughout all the users of the Bitcoin network. So if I'm going to use the traditional services of a bank, I cannot randomly select anyone here who has a bank account on that bank to validate the money I'm going to send to you through my bank account. But in Bitcoin, it works this way. You do not have to trust any specific entity. You just have to trust the technology itself because it works in a distributed fashion in which the users are responsible for making it possible to have such a system. And if I'm going to send you money, I'm going to send the money directly to you. It's much different because it's a peer-to-peer money. I'm not going to send the money to PayPal, for example, and PayPal is going to send it to you.
So what happens if you actually try and double spend the money?
It's not possible because just like I was talking to you, blockchain makes it possible to generate consensus because when I'm trying to, when I'm a user of this system and I'm trying to help the network with my with computations, I cannot do this in a dishonest way without behaving against the economic incentives. I mean, Bitcoin solves the problem on how to generate consensus on distributed networks by making it much more it costs you much more to be dishonest on the network than to be honest, because if you are trying to help the network in a positive way, you are going to receive bitcoins. I mean, the new generated bitcoins are sent to the ones who help to maintain the network. If you are trying to put wrong information, I mean, if you are using your computational power to put wrong information on the system, it's going to be terrible for you because it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Okay, so basically Bitcoin, just to try and summarize, Bitcoin enables you to transact on a peer-to-peer basis without having to rely on any central authority and without having to trust the person that you're transacting with, because you don't need to know the identity of the person you're transacting with, because the technology will ensure that the transaction always is correct.
Yeah, it's even bigger than that because I cannot say for sure, of course, but I guess that even Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin, was not sure, but he was creating a technology in which the service can work without the service provider. The first use case is Bitcoin for financial transactions, but this little but very beautiful thing called the blockchain technology can have much more broad uses.
But so if you eliminate the figure of the bank, for instance, you also eliminate the figure that is actually ensuring the legality, the legitimacy, in the sense that if it is indeed an anonymous or a pseudonymous money system, then can it not be used like for money laundering or like for criminal activities?
I guess it's not very used to use it for money laundering when I have more than 10,000 copies of all the transactions in computers all over the world. Of course, it's very, it opens the floor to many discussions on the legal aspects, of course. And
yeah, so absolutely. This is why governments and other stakeholders and banks have been, very scared of Bitcoin from the very beginning. Because you can do things on a peer-to-peer basis, all of our rules, all of our legal regimes, especially around financial transactions, assumes that there's a central authority, that there's a bank, there's someone who, when you are opening a bank account, is verifying who you are, for example, and making sure you're not on a terrorist watch list. So the fact that anyone can open up a bank account, in essence, without any oversight, it poses a lot of challenges to the regulatory authorities. So, one of the problem, however, is that, if you require, for example, everyone to tie an identity to a Bitcoin transaction, because that ledger is permanent and because it's transparent to everybody, it actually raises a huge host of privacy issues. It would be as though you were revealing your bank account online for everybody. So there's an incredible tension between these peer-to-peer technologies, especially when it cuts into financial networks, and all of our rules and laws that require financial networks to collect identifying information and monitor those networks to ensure that these are not illicit transactions. So there are a lot of discussion going around on how to deal with this. I mean, it cuts into being able to deal with this idea of being able to trust this person that you're dealing with on the internet. The internet inherently doesn't have identity built into it. So if you can access these peer-to-peer networks without providing identity, it's going to run into a whole host of regulatory issues.
I just want to add a quick point on this. Because one thing that I do believe that is very interesting on this regulatory perspective is because, of course, the digital system itself is a bit of, this is very unstoppable. It's distributed. It's very interesting. It's very new for us, and and in this sense, it's of course a challenge. But the Bitcoin ecosystem as a whole is already regulated in some sense because, for example, if I want to go to an exchange, one of these websites where you can buy and sell Bitcoins, I have to do this through the legacy banking system. I have to deposit my dollars or my Brazilian reais in. Of course, if you're trying to do something very suspicious on a large scale, I guess it's
well,
not.
But you're
hard.
talking that Bitcoin is actually eliminating the financial intermediary, but now you're talking about the intermediaries again.
Yeah, that's a very nice question. I guess Bitcoin is working in the right direction in the sense of eliminating intermediaries, but it's not totally true right now. I mean, the system itself is definitely distributed, decentralized. It does not need any source of intermediary. I mean, if you create an internal economy in which people are giving and receiving Bitcoin, I mean, I'm just going to found a new country and Bitcoin is the official currency, So this is a certain thing. But Bitcoin right now is in a certain process, I would say, of being, it's working to complement what we already have on the financial system. I mean, it's disruptive, but not only this.
So you cannot regulate the technology, but you can regulate the intermediaries that are dealing or operating with that technology. Are there already been any example of regulations that actually have been attempting at regulating this technology by regulating the operators?
Yeah, absolutely. So in New York has been the first state to come out with a Bitcoin-specific licensing regime requiring a special license for Bitcoin operators. the trouble here, of course, is that there's a huge barrier to entry, so it requires these operators to collect a whole host of information. You have to apply for this licensing regime. It makes it very hard for a business that wants to just operate a platform to start up. The other problem is, I mean, there's some unique challenges. So just a little bit of background, I was the first general counsel of a Bitcoin exchange in the ecosystem. So my job was actually trying to figure out how to build compliant systems. And you actually can't follow the letter of the law. The letter of the law says that you have to monitor every transaction for source of funds. So, you know, you actually can't reject a Bitcoin payment. So when a Bitcoin payment hits your account, there's no way of stopping that payment from hitting your account. Now, the law says that the moment something hits your account, you know, you might have opened up an account for a customer, you might have received funds. So without kind of knowing where that endpoint is coming from, in the law, you know, normally you would know which bank or which operator it's coming from, but it might just be coming from a random Bitcoin address. You really, just by virtue of using the Bitcoin network, you're running afoul of you know, sometimes you're running afoul of certain financial regulations. So there have been a lot of attempts to figure out how to deal with this, and they're not perfect. So if you require every single operator, for example, to collect identifying information, then you know you're probably running into a lot of privacy issues because you're not you're collecting identifying information that can be tied to transactions that are visible to many people. So so this is kind of where, you know, you have on one hand the need to monitor these networks to be able to identify who these endpoints are. On the other hand, because this is a really paradigm shifting system, it's not apples to apples, it's apples and oranges. You know, you're actually exacerbating really huge privacy problems that we're already seeing with the data breaches and trusting a central authority to collect this information.
Okay, so well, Bitcoin is quite a disruptive technology in terms of financial institution, but the blockchain is much more than Bitcoin, right? So what is beyond? What is after Bitcoin? Like, what can you do with the blockchain in addition to just financial transaction or payment systems?
Yeah, I guess on these points, there are lots of initiatives going on right now, but I do believe that the most disruptive being built right now is the one you see there. It's called Ethereum, and considering that many of us already know Bitcoin, try to understand Ethereum as a generalization of the blockchain technology that works behind Bitcoin. So just like I was explaining to you, Bitcoin works a bit like this way, you know. Not all, but a large part of the users who are part of the network, they have this database with all the transactions ever made in Bitcoin. So try to understand it a little bit, just like a database being try to understand it as a database containing all the transactions between all the users. And if I send some Bitcoins to Primavera, I'm going to upload, the network is going to upload a new version of this database saying that, okay, I have to.
But how can you use this beyond financial application, those transactions?
Yeah, everything you have to do, of course, it's very complex in technical terms, but if you put information, different information, just like programs on databases like this, it's going to be much different. All the data in these blockchain databases running on the blockchain of Bitcoin, they are entirely built to represent financial transactions. So there are numbers. I'm sending 1 to Primavera, Primavera is sending 10 to Constance. And if instead of Bitcoin, which was built this way, we built a whole new system with a whole brand new blockchain, this database on which you can write whatever
so you want to write,
different.
what do you write on top of that database?
Well, you can actually do anything. That's right now, I think a lot of questions, a common question that I get is, Bitcoin, it's the only blockchain out there. So we have to actually explain that Bitcoin is the first blockchain. It's the first instance of this new technology, and that there are many, many other blockchains out there that are experimenting with different uses. So the fact that we call these tokens, in essence, that are passing on this decentralized network, the fact that we assign a value, a money value to it, doesn't necessarily mean that's the only use case. They're essentially tokens that can represent anything. That token that we're passing on this decentralized network can mean a vote, it can mean membership, it can mean a more complicated financial transaction than just a figure. So with these, because this is because it's both transparent and secure and decentralized, you can build all sorts of business and social logic with these tokens and the way they interact. You can say, if X happens, then funds are released. If milestones are met, or if a corporation takes this kind of action, then automatically there could be a corporate vote. So you can do all sorts of really cool kind of business logic sorts of things on a transparent basis without needing one central person coordinating these movements.
And I guess the most interesting idea being worked right now with the blockchain technology is the idea of smart contracts, because I guess in a certain moment, the people working for the Bitcoin community came up with the idea. For example, you have you need access to the private key of a specific Bitcoin account to move these funds. So the first very simple way of building a smart contract on top of the Bitcoin blockchain was creating what we call a multi-signature wallet. So I can create a specific Bitcoin address on which the funds can only be moved when two out of this group of three sign the transaction. So it's the very, very beginning of the smart contract technology. Right now it can be used by many, many other things. I mean, Bitcoin and other tokens running behind the blockchain cannot be only understood as programmable money, but programmable tokens that can interact with each other in the form of smart contracts.
Okay, so perhaps we could try and go into practicalities and show an example of what we can do with those tokens, which is actually not directly connected with financial transaction or payment system. So Bitcoin being the first blockchain, the second blockchain or the second application of blockchain technology was actually Namecoin, which essentially replicates exactly the same mechanism as Bitcoin, except that instead of being used in order to ensure trustless transaction of currency, Namecoin was actually designed to manage, in a decentralized manner, the registration and the transfer of domain name. So essentially, it is actually up and running today. It is just not being used by many people, but anyone that connects to the Namecoin network can actually purchase .bit domains, and there is actually no need for any kind of organization such as ICANN, which is traditionally this centralized coordination entity, which is required in order to ensure that there is no two people that are registering the same domain name. By using the blockchain technology, it is actually possible to use a decentralized technology to achieve exactly the same result. Now, Namecoin is actually quite a simple technology. It's really just a small little tweak to the Bitcoin blockchain, but because of Ethereum and because of all the blockchain 2.0 technologies, then it is now possible to actually create much more sophisticated applications which are always going towards this concept of disintermediation. So Bitcoin has shown that it is now possible to disintermediate the financial institutions. Namecoin has shown that it is possible to actually replace ICANN with a working decentralized peer-to-peer network. And then there is now many other decentralized applications which are emerging that are trying to disintermediate other kind of centralized figure that we thought for a long time we could not get rid of, right? Mm-hmm. So one really interesting example is the example of Lazus. So Lazus is a decentralized and real-time peer-to-peer ride-sharing system which is using actually a blockchain technologies. And the idea is essentially very simple. In the same way as Bitcoin provides tokens for people that are connecting to the network and mining, so the more I provide computational resources to the Bitcoin network, the more I get rewarded with some Bitcoin, so that's a system of incentivization. In the Lazus system, it is, instead of being proof of work, it is based on the concept of proof of movement. So whenever I provide a ride, whenever I'm actually proving that I am moving with my car, I'm actually obtaining those Lazuz tokens, which I can then use later on in order to pay for my rides. So it is a system of peer-to-peer real-time ride sharing, in the sense that we don't need the figure of Uber, which is in charge of coordinating the people wanting a ride and the people providing the ride. The people are just connecting and registering what they are looking for or what they are providing on the blockchain, and then automatically they get matched up. But in addition to this, there is also this incentivization mechanism, in the sense that people are incentivized to contribute to the Lazuz network by providing computational resources in order to ensure the security of the network, because they also get those tokens. So it has an inherent incentivization mechanism which brings people to contribute to the network. Now, the interesting thing is that this is one example, but this is an example that can be generalized to many other kinds of applications. The problem today is that basically everyone is like, the field is really emergent, and people are just trying and exploring still at this point and trying to develop new decentralized organization or decentralized application. But it is still really, it is in some way we have all the time to start from scratch to try and experiment and figure out how to do it. So by analogy with the internet, we are basically a little bit like in '94 or something like this, like before the web, as actually the HTTP protocol existed, when people were essentially building application, internet application, but there was no easy way to interoperate between each other because everyone was using a different protocol. So we have like FTP, we have like IRC, and etc. So it's kind of similar. We are a little bit in the same model today in the blockchain world. One interesting project that is emerging is Backfeed, which essentially presents itself in the same way as the HTTP protocol, but for the blockchain. So basically it provides a really easy way for anyone to just deploy a decentralized application or a decentralized organization on top of the blockchain, which has inherent incentivization mechanism, in the sense that so the underlying idea is the concept of this tokenization. So people are providing value, where value can be expressed according to what kind of community or organization we're talking about. So anyone that is contributing value to this organization will be rewarded tokens. And then those tokens are used in order to enable people to benefit from the service that is provided by the community. So this is really interesting in the sense that it allows to some extent a new paradigm in the way in which organizations are managed. So as opposed to relying on these centralized entities where we have like this hierarchical structure and top-down management, we can now try and adopt more flat and more open distributed networks, so kind of like the open source model, but we can generalize the open source model to any sector of activities, in the sense that there is no longer anyone that needs to tell someone else what to do, but it is just like people that are spontaneously contributing to an organization or to a community, and according to the value that they provide to this community, they will be rewarded. So this creates this indirect coordination mechanism, which is based on the blockchain, where people coordinate themselves through the blockchain without relying on a central identity, but also people can be rewarded according to their contribution to the community. So it's a really, really interesting paradigm shift in organization management. Now, the really interesting thing, though, is those are all examples in which we are using the blockchain in order to mediate an organization. So this is, we are people, social organizations that are coordinating themselves by using the blockchain as the underlying framework. In the same way as today we have digitally mediated organization, then tomorrow we can have blockchain mediated organization. Now, the really interesting thing, though, is that the blockchain actually enables even more than that. So that's just the first paradigm shift. But there is a further paradigm shift, which is, for instance, when we have those so-called digital distributed autonomous organizations, where there needs no longer to be a human being involved.
So with with DAOs or DCOs, for example, because you can actually coordinate things automatically, you can actually enforce rules in code that are transparent to all. You actually don't really even need a human sometimes. You can actually design a corporation, for example, to follow a certain kind of business logic. And because there are also value transfers involved, you could have people, you could have that corporation paying employees, you could have it making certain decision-making processes based on voting rights. You actually have the ability to create completely autonomous organizations that where its actions are fully transparent.
Can you give an example of a fully distributed autonomous organization?
Well, I don't think we have one yet.
Well, a potential speculative example, like casino or something.
Try to think about self-driving cars. They are the owners of themselves. I mean, it's very, very crazy. It's a bit of, is it going to be the Matrix or Skynet? I mean, don't be afraid. But Google just developed. I mean, the self-driving cars are just being developed by Google. We can think of an example of a decentralized autonomous organization in this sense. You know, if I put a self-driving car and this self-driving car is going to give rides when you pay with the cryptocurrency. I want, for example, this car is going to give you rides if you pay Bitcoin to it. And it's so fun because at a certain point, the self-driving car is going to start to be an autonomous, autonomous self, because he can, the car can pick this money and reinvest in this decentralized organization, buying other cars who are owners of themselves as well.
So perhaps just as a it's a beautiful or scary future, but in fact today there is like some preliminary distributed autonomous organization, and I guess the most obvious example is like a casino. So we can now deploy, because the blockchain enables people to deploy software on this distributed database, which is run autonomously. It is possible to create software that is not run or owned by anyone, but that is just running autonomously. And the particularity is basically the autonomy. So there is no one that is actually controlling it, because once it has been deployed on top of the blockchain, it just operates according to those rules which have been encoded, and no one actually can change those rules. So the autonomy is also, so the autonomy is one thing, but the second element in order to really making a distributed organization is the fact that this organization is self-sufficient. So for instance, in the case of a casino, people are sending money to this application, to this smart contract on the blockchain, and then every time people transact with it, it's operating, it's executing itself, and then it will return some money to whoever has decided to win. So the smart contract itself can fulfill its own purpose of like survival, in the sense that it can charge the user for the service that it provides in order to then continue to operate on its own. So it doesn't need anyone to control it, and it doesn't need anyone to actually keep feeding it with new gas in order to operate. So obviously this creates really interesting regulatory issues as well.
So, you know, usually if you have a completely autonomous software that's running and doing things, there's actually no person running it. So in terms of accountability, in terms of review, there really isn't anyone that you can find. So you know, there are a lot of conversations going on, and whether you actually would need a kill switch for something like this. What if you had a rogue computer program? I mean, this is, we use this example at Berkman. You know, what if you had a vending machine whose business logic was to, you know, buy the things that have the highest rate of return, and let's say that was illegal drugs, and it started going around doing these sorts of things? Would you need a kill switch then to stop that self-driving vending machine from continuing its logic? So so that's it. So we've gone from, you know, being able to oversee peer-to-peer networks, which is a challenge in and of itself, to being able to oversee autonomous agents on peer-to-peer networks, which is another whole host of issues. But I think, you know, before opening it up to questions, you know, these technologies, you hear a lot of crazy things about it, but it really represents not just a paradigm shift in the technology itself, but in the way we organize ourselves and in the way we measure value. So, you know, we've had really limited roads and really limited ways of counting the way value occurs. So this opens up many, many roads of value transfer, of communications, of coordination, and doing this on a secure peer-to-peer basis. But it allows us then to be creative and to invent new ways of measuring, what money is, or what we want to, what we actually value in society, and how we can coordinate around that. But again, the more and more people are able to coordinate themselves, the more ordinary people are able to do things on their own, the more disruptive it is to a whole host of regulatory and legal regimes that assume that there's somebody up there that can kind of oversee everything. So
I guess the bottom line is that really similar to how the internet was perceived early on, that it will create an amazing potential for individual emancipation, freedom, etc. But at the same time, there was this vision of the internet as being this space of criminality and anarchy and chaos, because the state could no longer put its own hegemony on top of the cyberspace. And then over time, in fact, people have slowly understood that indeed there is still this potential for individual emancipation, but then the internet also become this really powerful tool of surveillance and control. So the blockchain has like a really interesting similar dynamics, in the sense that it actually goes even one step further in the potential for freedom, emancipation, and disintermediation and peer-to-peer transaction, etc. But at the same time, it is also a really powerful technology, because it provides all this transparency on the one hand, but also these self-enforcing and self-executing smart contracts. So to some extent, it's kind of like much more radical than the bifurcation that the internet was providing. And the question now is quite the same: is how can we actually benefit from all the potential that those technologies are providing to the citizen? But how do we make sure that it also live within a fair regulatory framework, and that is, on the one hand, protective of civil liberties, but at the same time that it doesn't get co-opted by the established powers in order to actually use it against the citizens. So I guess we can now open to the public.
Whoa, it's beautiful.
Yes. I think you're over there first.
How does it work? I don't know.
Yeah,
That.
yeah, over there.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, sorry. My name is Fernando Botelho. I'm responsible for a project called F123. We provide accessibility to the blind. Just a suggestion. I think the technology is scary enough. You don't need to use casino as an example. You might want to use, microcredits. We could create an autonomous entity that specializes on gathering savings and making loans, something like that. That would be amazing. Because interest rates are a way of sustaining banks, but if you have a bank that is autonomous and self-sustaining, inherently self-sustaining, you can have an interest-free loan. That's pretty amazing. So who should I talk to create this? Thank you.
So actually, there are a ton of banks that are now looking at integrating blockchain or sponsoring blockchain innovation labs. So this is, I think, there are a lot of people that you could talk to who'd be interested in piloting a project like this.
And peer-to-peer lending is already a very hot topic on the Bitcoin ecosystems. There are 3 or 4 reasonably big startups working on it. So I guess it's just like Constance said, it's a matter of time for us to see much more wilder, let's call them this way, much more disruptive initiatives on this area.
Start with a request, which is that actually we need a number of sessions at the next IGF focused on this topic. One is not enough, is my suggestion. To echo the last point, I'm involved in activities in London which are looking right the way across the full spectrum of sectors and with government uses. And the point I would make is that we're seeing a split between what I would call the trusted communities, and we openly talk of trusted Bitcoin versus untrusted Bitcoin. and what's the character and nature of those? What are the capabilities that need to be wrapped around both a blockchain on the one hand and cryptocurrencies on the other when you want to work in a trusted environment versus an untrusted environment? And I just wondered if you could say something about capabilities, the other things that you need to have, like enrollment functions and so on, for entities in order to meet things like LEI compliance in banking, and we've got other requirements in e-health and so on.
A couple of questions. So a couple of answers to that. One is, on one hand, you want to make sure that operators are responsible, that they have good processes, that they're safeguarding money, that they are, their IT systems are they have, cybersecurity programs, that sort of thing. So that inherently means you need somebody then checking the box and looking at them and, having an auditor come in and having some licensing authority go through that. That's inherently at odds with a P2P technology where anyone can do anything. So, right now, I think, given that this is money, these are people's funds, and you are talking about financial networks, you do need some level of oversight. Now, if you put on the whole analog world of oversight to these companies, you're not going to see a lot of innovation grow. And so it's a really difficult question, and there aren't really easy answers to that. I think another issue which hasn't been raised is that these P2P technologies assume that consumers can take care of their keys, for example. So what happens when you lose a key? You lose access to your funds. What happens if your key is stolen? Then you'll lose your funds. So, on one hand, you need, I think, a higher level of education, not only on the operator side to be able to understand where the risks are. On the other, I think you need governments involved that understand what the how the technology works and what the implications of a rule is. So, for example, if you require every operator to collect identification, you will destroy financial privacy. You will be relying on small startups to safeguard personal financial information, which, once tied to a transparent network, completely destroys financial privacy. So you simply cannot take the old regulatory environment and say, do this. That won't work. So it's going to take time. It's going to take having some consumer protection guidelines in place. That's something that we as a group have been working on. I highly encourage you to come to our workshop on Friday at 3 o'clock, where we'll have a full hour to discuss these issues, and we can talk a little bit about what governments and policymakers and universities and people in the ecosystem have been doing to solve those questions.
I will also add that there is this really interesting misconception, I guess, by the fact that blockchain is trustless technology, which means that you don't need to trust anyone, but it also means that you're eliminating the concept of trust. And it is true that at a technical level, so when I make a transaction to you, I don't need to trust you. Or when I make a contract with you, I don't need to trust you for abiding to the contract, because the technology will enforce that. But on the other hand, for most of our daily activities, we actually want trust. So the blockchain technology is creating this trustless underlying framework. But now, because we eliminated the figure of the intermediaries, and the intermediaries is not just the person that coordinates the actions of individuals, but it's also the person that provides some kind of policy, or policing the network to make sure that everything is okay, that people are not bad people, because if I interact, for instance, on Airbnb, I want to make sure not only that the payment will go through, but I also want to make sure that I'm going into a house that is a good house, etc. So because we eliminate the intermediary, then now we need to recreate on top of this trustless technology a new layer, a new trust layer, in fact, a new system of which has to be a distributed system of trust, because we cannot rely on the central intermediary. So it's quite a challenging question, both at the regulatory level, but also more at the governance level. We need to identify how we can design distributed governance structures, which can enable a new layer of trust on top of a trustless system. And the more trustless is the system, the more you need this layer of trust for every interaction that actually people want to rely on some level of trust. We don't have an answer yet, but we're working on it.
We're working on it.
me, other people will want to ask questions, but the supply chain requirements for federated trust models are very well established indeed, which is why people are looking at applying those experiences over the top of these kinds of technologies. Look forward to the workshop.
Mark from Microsoft. I think I heard that there's a copy of the BitChain database on every user's machine, right? Yeah.
Not all users, but the ones who choose to work as a miner, you know, to contribute with their computers.
Oh, okay. Oh, so just the miners? So
Yeah, there are nearly 5,000 or 6,000 copies of this database right now, but it can vary a lot. Not just the miners, but the users who want to contribute running what we call a full node, you know, because there are two ways to do that. You can save all this database on your computer, or you can trust on a server to record this for you. But these are separate things, you know. You can check the work of the miners to see and have this database on your own computer, but the miners are the ones responsible to validate the transactions.
So how big is it, and how fast is it growing?
It's growing a lot. I mean, I don't know.
I think it's over 20 gigabytes at the moment.
It's very big.
40?
Yeah, I mean,
it just keeps growing.
I'm running a full node at home, but I don't actually know how big it is because it's getting bigger.
But that's actually one big problem. Like at the moment, the blockchain, and that's why right now everything is really experimental. At the moment, the real only practical application, which might not be practical eventually, is Bitcoin, because the blockchain still has this big problem, which is scalability. And this problem has not yet been resolved. There's a lot of research going on. Many people are working on it.
Thank you.
But eventually, this is like the big bottleneck is the scalability problem.
But I think you're going to see in a year and a half, alternative incentive mechanisms and consensus protocols coming out that may solve that problem. We have two questions over there.
Yeah, so my name is Diego, and I work for CGI.pr as an advisor. I have two questions. One is related to ICON, as you guys mentioned. I follow the IANA transition, and it seems that Namecoin is not suitable for replacing ICON itself, but the domain name system, and the domain name system cannot be equated to ICON, right? ICON has a lot of control over the generic top-level domains, but has absolutely no control over country code top-level domains. So it was not clear to me how would a Namecoin substitute this very distributed system, which is the DNS. We of course have the central focus, which is the coordination of the creation of one root zone file, but then the distribution, the copy of it is completely autonomous from for every individual who operates the domain name system. So I don't know if you can explain or refer to other sources for my consultant.
It's not about replacing ICANN. ICANN as an organization is obviously also...
Oh, well, but at least we have voice. Wow, that's amazing.
I think they don't like the idea of replacing ICANN.
Or maybe we're too ugly for the transmission. Yeah, or maybe we're just too ugly for the transmission, and they just like...
It's more about like providing an alternative mechanism which can pretty much fulfill the similar function in terms of domain name registration and transfer. ICANN, for instance, also deals with like cyber squatting and alternative. With these, of course, will have to be built on top of Namecoin. So Namecoin itself is just this decentralized database that enables decentralized coordination, so that to make sure that no two person can have the same domain name at any given time.
Yeah, but it's not ICANN as its staff and its organization. There's I would just like to set this straight. Governments, companies, individual users, grassroots entities, they all are part of the policies related to the domain name system, even in the IETF. Right, so it's not exactly ICANN, it's the domain name system.
Yes.
And the second thing is just like you guys are talking about, I took notes here about, well, how can we benefit from the potential that we have with this technology? And you guys been saying that this is a power technology that enables a lot of shift. But one of the shifts that I've never seen anyone talking about while dealing with Bitcoin is the huge asymmetries that mark the financial system today. And if you could just suggest readings or something like that related how Bitcoin could be used to revert asymmetries between the developed and the developing world, it would be great, because it doesn't seem clear at this point that we have any assessment of how concentrated the distribution of Bitcoin is when you compare the developed and the developing world.
Yeah, the inefficiency of what is it, the rating on the efficiency, quoted. So yes, so the distribution basically of Bitcoin is incredibly concentrated. So then there's a lot of criticism of that. But Bitcoin is the first. So there are others. There are other, alternative currencies coming out, and I think reducing the disparity between the developed world and the developing world is one of the greatest promises of these kinds of technologies. So, if you read Consumers Union, report in 2012 and the World Bank report, you see exactly how the monopolization of financial rails have created incredible disparity in the poorest countries in Africa. The remittance payments are 50% of their GDP, and we're literally, charging these migrants 25% of every $100 they send home, and it's really reducing the amount of the ability of these countries to really evolve. At the same time, 70% of the global aid that we send to Africa is being charged back in remittances. So we're literally, all this worry that of all the aid that we're sending to Africa, for example, whether it's reaching corrupt governments or constituencies, we're literally charging 70% of that value back in from Western Union and other charges. So if we could take that away, you think you would see really, really big changes. Also, in order to be able to send any money around, you do have to use these rails. So imagine, people in developing countries without access to bank accounts being able to access capital and send money without these incredibly usurious charges. So that's a huge, I think, gain there.
I guess being very honest to you, Bitcoin was not created to offer solutions to these problems, but if we create applications on top of it, we can start grasping solutions to it. I don't have the time to explain everything to you, but try to read about a project being built on top of the Ethereum blockchain called Swarm, okay? It's just like for financial collaboration, it's totally different, the mindset for some part, I have to be honest with you, of the Bitcoin community.
I'd like to hear from you about the position for reputation systems contained in the blockchain. I think it's also a powerful feature that people should hear about, and I'd like to hear especially from you about it.
I guess I have to answer that. What do you mean by reputation system?
Using, I think Ethereum does that, of measuring reputation according to your payments. You have paid, eventually, if you have credit for example, DAOs, if they work with microcredit, a DAO, for example, a bank DAO that sends loans money. I think Vitalik said once about the potential of creating a reputation system that attributes to wallets or people or tokens a certain reputation level that is used globally.
Yeah, so you actually have two types of reputation system. One will be the personal reputation system, which basically is based on a subjective vision of like who do you trust and who do you not trust. So for instance, in the case of Airbnb or like all those things that are subjective to the person that wants to find out whether or not to interact with another person. So personal reputation system are actually, they emerge from the fact that if you can record a lot of information, like every transaction is recorded, and then you can add metadata on top of this transaction, and then every different people which have different value system, they can look at this shared database and they can infer information about how much reputation to apply to every single person. So the nice thing that the blockchain provides, as opposed to current model, today, for instance, you can have only one reputation system per platform, because it is the one platform that actually deploy its own system of reviews, or like eBay has its own rating system, etc. You cannot have multiple visions. So even though reputation, personal reputation, is inherently subjective, because of the centralization of the platform, you can only use one subjective system, which is actually the one of the platform. So the platform is imposing its own value system in order that everyone is abiding to the same reputation system. So that's one really interesting thing that the blockchain provides, because being a decentralized database, anyone can apply its own value metrics on top and create its own reputation system, which can be either its own personal, or it can be the one of a community, etc. So that's one part. The other thing, which I think is even more interesting, is the objective or public reputation system, which is when you actually want to generate value. So for instance, the backfeed protocol is exactly about this. So if I contribute to a community, I become, if my contribution is actually valued by the value system of the community, there needs to be a method, and it has to be a decentralized consensus method in order to decide how much is the value of my contribution, and therefore how much I will be rewarded in terms of tokens. But in addition to this, as I contribute to this community, I also become a member of the community, and I acquire some kind of weight. So in this way, like, the objective or public reputation system is more like of an influence system. So by contributing to the community, I acquire a little bit of an influence, which will enable me to evaluate the contribution of others. And so you can create, I mean, we can discuss later a lot, or I can send you information, but Backfeed is actually the first protocol that actually designed an objective reputation system which can be run on a decentralized system, because this is actually quite difficult, because being a decentralized system, it can really easily be cheated, and you do not have the central authority that can clean up the people that are like pretending to be something, or that are multiplying their identities in order to abuse the system. So it's a really challenging task, and I mean it's of course still a work in progress, but I think Backfeed at the moment is the most advanced example of objective reputation system.
And if we succeed, we'll have just a whole new world of being able to interact. I mean, right now we have such narrow measures of value. So GDP is, you know, the value creation of a country, and it's literally manufactured numbers that have changed, you know, over the next 10 years, and they're inaccurate. So imagine actually being able to track real values, being able to track, you know, appreciation, being able to move beyond GDP as a measure of value creation, or move beyond, you know, a credit report to say who you are. You know, your community knows who you are. If you're able to securely and tokenize that, and create a really transparent way of being able to show that to the rest of the world, and make that reputation then fungible with real world financial networks, or, you know, or banks, that sort of thing. You know, you suddenly open up a much more holistic and accurate picture of who you are that will enable many, many more people to participate in our economies.
Hello. Really nice talking. It clarified a whole lot of doubts. But with all this talking that you just had, you solved the problem of the value of use. Like Bitcoin is a currency. Virtual currencies have value of use, as you just did the talking. But how about the reserve of value? Like, one of the functions of money is bearing some value, a reserve of value. We see this with the US dollar and another strong currencies. And then this is the issue, the reason that I'm skeptical about Bitcoin, because the lack of coverage on the Bitcoin may let investors and average people away from it, because its value can be very volatile, and you have nothing to bear the value to the Bitcoin. So it makes Bitcoin a weak currency, right? It makes of it really volatile and very no value, like gold, US dollar. So can you clarify my doubts and my skepticism?
I mean, it is volatile, and that's for sure. One thing perhaps is because it's actually really new, and like just a very small change in demand will change radically the price. You could imagine that if Bitcoin was adopted in a much more mainstream way, then it would be much harder to actually change the value, but that's speculation. On the other hand, you can actually design cryptocurrencies which are not so volatile. You can actually design system of like peg or partial peg and actually ensure that there is only a particular range in which the token can go. So a community can decide, for instance, I never want this currency to have a market price higher than X. Yeah. And then whenever the market price gets higher than X, it means that the community will actually sell that token for that price. So automatically, obviously, people will no longer purchase the token in the market. They will purchase it directly to the community. The community will issue a new amount of token, and therefore the market price will drop. So the problem with Bitcoin is that it has been algorithmically encoded the amount of Bitcoin that can be issued every time. But if you actually create an alternative cryptocurrency which has a variable amount of issuance, then you can actually completely reduce the volatility and you can actually control the market value of a currency by deciding how much to issue.
And I think just getting down to more fundamental, it's the social wrapping and the legal wrapping around currency that makes it currency. So gold actually has no intrinsic value. It's a rock. It's a natural resource, right? But it has certain properties that have made it valuable for us to use as money because it's fungible, it's scarce, it's easy to carry around. These are the qualities that we took in order to choose this as something that's valuable. Same thing with money. Money is actually, there's no gold standard. They're pieces of paper. And the cup of coffee that you buy today is actually worth a little bit more or less than that same cup of coffee you bought yesterday because of the volatility. And we have now, obviously people who governments, enact monetary policies to deal with that volatility. But it's really, so none of these things inherently make this money. So we can actually, the exciting thing about these protocols is that you can actually embed different monetary policies and social policies into the money. So you can actually, so Bitcoin was a response to the financial crisis. So it was designed to be scarce. It was designed to not be inflationary. You could design in parallel another currency that required that had a negative interest rate. So you could actually use two different kinds of currencies that have two different kinds of policies. So you have different see, right now there are a lot of experiments going on in different protocols. The volatility, the inequality of Bitcoin, that's a huge issue. But hopefully we will see more experimentations that actually allow us to leverage these technologies for the capabilities they really have.
And there is this big problem, in fact, because Bitcoin is actually, to some extent, is a bad example because it's stigmatizing all the blockchain ecosystem because people don't really like Bitcoin because of all the problem it has, and it has an amazing number of problems. But it also has an amazing technology underlying it, and there is so much things happening around Bitcoin, but many people are actually just not even paying attention to those because they just stigmatize the concept of Bitcoin to all the blockchain technologies, which I think is really dangerous, actually.
Yes. Thank you. You are two amazing women.
Have a look at a project running on Ethereum called Maker. Just access, don't know if you know this project, just access makerdeo if you don't know .com. It's just like building stable currency on top of Ethereum blockchain.
Hi, my name is Rafael. It's me.
She was waiting before, sorry.
Sorry.
Then you go the next one.
It's me or you?
Just go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. My name is Viviane. I'm from ANET and from Youth Observatory. And for to be true with you, it's the first time that I heard the terms of Bitcoin and blockchain. And I'm really happy to say that in the middle of this workshop, I researched a little here to understand better what are you saying, talking about. And with two questions for you. The first one is how the blockchain can teach in transparency, in quality, in system for our actual monetary system that is non-public and is centralized. And I want to know too, what is what is about? Oh, in your opinion, what is the trees of Merkle because for me it looks like a cloud, something like that. So it's a little bit confusing because we have this blockchain and we have these trees of miracles, and this is like pushing my mind, and I'm a little bit confused here. So I want you to explain and put your opinion about the first one and the second one, please.
So right now, transparency is hugely transparent. So if you can imagine, let's say the Bitcoin network is a network of banks. Imagine all of the money that they're passing through and the investments, imagine all of that being online for anyone to see. So instead of having these small black boxes of information, we're trusting the bank to report out, you know, that those ledgers and those accounts are accurate. Instead of trusting that, you can actually see it and you can actually verify it yourself. So it's actually hugely transparent. Of course, the other side of that is that there are reasons why you need to have privacy. So so actually the privacy issues are much more, I think, pressing than the transparency issues. I think the transparency is evident in the technology. And then I'll do the Merkle trees. I'll pass it over
I
to
don't
Gabriel.
want to try and explain Merkle tree in 1 minute.
Miss, I'm going to try to explain it in Portuguese for you later, because in English it's going to be so hard for me.
My name is Rafael. I'm from PUC Rio University, and I work with digital TV broadcasting. And I read about an experiment they did in Finland, I think, broadcasting the blockchain through the air and over a normal broadcast channel. And I think that really blockchain is a database model that fits very well for broadcasting. And we all know that really free-to-air broadcasting, the importance of it is getting a little lower because of internet especially. So I think, for example, here in Brazil, with the ISBT standard, we have about, depending on the configuration of the transmitter, about 20 megabits of bandwidth. For example, if one broadcaster allocate 10 or 15 megabits to broadcast the blockchain, it maybe will solve some problems of distribution of the blockchain. With a 10 kilowatt transmitter, you can broadcast to 10 million people. If there is one people receiving the signal, or a million of people receiving the signal, doesn't matter. And it's also, you cannot really, if anyone is trying to check who is using Bitcoin, if you take a look at the network and you see the blockchains going around, maybe you can track these people, but using broadcast, don't have a way. You receive it in a passive way. So I'd like to hear, what do you think about using broadcasting to send the blockchain to the people?
Such a hard question. Let me think a little bit about it. I mean, there are many different things I can say about what you just asked. For example, I do agree with you that blockchain. I mean, the blockchain is actually a way of broadcasting information, but you have to keep in mind that this is a distributed network, which is the main feature is generating consensus. So to generate and moreover to maintain this consensus, there is a small time you have to wait for the network to validate the information so that we can say, okay, this is the truth. So we can broadcast the truth of all this data to all the other nodes of the network. So in the Bitcoin network, this time is generally speaking 10 minutes. If we go for the Ethereum blockchain, in general, 15 seconds. It can vary a lot from blockchain to blockchain. Of course, it's a trade-off. You know, why we don't have new blocks on Bitcoin each second? You know, because it's a matter of digital security. So by comparing those two technologies, you have to keep in mind this aspect, you know, because for generating consensus, you have to wait a little bit to have the validation and to broadcast this information, because all the architecture of a blockchain was built to generate consensus. So it makes sense for you to use blockchain technology to broadcast information that depends on consensus. Just keep in mind these kind of things. Regarding the use of other kinds of broadcasting technologies to spread blockchains, to refresh the blockchains of each user, it's amazing. I mean, you just came with the most interesting case I know so far. You know, this case of I don't know which group or which person using the TV signal there in Finland to broadcast. So Bitcoin and blockchain technology in general does not depend on the internet anymore. It's just a matter of access to the network. And there is even just to finish my point, there is even a Bitcoin developer who is planning to launch satellites around the Earth. So Bitcoins and blockchain technologies which have access to the satellites, you know, it's going to be even more unstoppable in the sense.
Hello, I'm Fabiano from the Center of Technology and Society, and I don't know much about Bitcoins, but I have a simple question. Is it possible a credit system based on Bitcoin or not?
That's a very nice question. What do you think about it? I mean, is it possible to offer credit through Bitcoin, blockchains? I mean,
you mean like loans and stuff?
Like credit?
Like loans? Like microcredits?
Like capital credit?
yeah, I mean,
Yes,
it's possible. I mean, just like I said to Diego in his question, I mean, the technology, I mean, Bitcoin was not created to offer credit because it's cash. It's just like if you ask me, can I use cash, I mean, Brazilian real notes to offer credit? I mean, the technology of the bills? No. It's better to use digital system and, you know, a bank to offer credit. I mean, sorry for my very rough comparison, but I mean, you can build services like that on top of the Bitcoin. It's perfect possible, and we have, just like I said to someone here, peer-to-peer lending is a hot topic on the Bitcoin ecosystem. We have many
and with smart contract, you can actually create like enforcing systems so that you know for sure, like I can loan a particular amount of money, and then with whatever mechanism you can design into the smart contract, I know for sure that if a condition happen, then a transaction will also happen. So you cannot cheat on my credit to some extent.
Yeah, and you could also use smart contracts to hedge the volatility of Bitcoin, because obviously offering credit leaves you, exposed to that volatility. So you could have smart contracts that then, basically hedge the volatility on whatever credit you're extending.
Okay. She was talking about inflection. It was Bitcoin was made not to provoke inflection.
Inflation.
Inflation.
Right.
I'm sorry. And based on credit, is it possible that Bitcoin? I'm sorry. She was talking about relations before, and is it one more reason to create the trust layer you're talking about? Because credit involves more personal environment. I understand like that. So out of the logical layer, is it one more reason to keep on with people working on it when you use credit associated with Bitcoin? And is it work Bitcoin has working in a system of credit and not provoking inflection on economy or inflation? Sorry.
I mean, inflation on the Bitcoin network is totally controlled by code. We have a specific amount of Bitcoin which are generated each 10 minutes.
Okay, I was not clear. Even if you're using a system of credit. Yes.
So you cannot, like as banks do today, which is they change a number in order to give credit on the expectation that the system will not break down because not everyone will come back to get the money. You cannot do that on the blockchain because you cannot. There is no one that can. There's no bank or central authority that can create new money. So you can loan your money because you have the money. You can make a loan and then expect that money in return. But you cannot generate out of nothing a new bunch of Bitcoin that you can offer to someone.
There are no bonds on the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Hello, my name is Victor. I'm a researcher from the University of São Paulo. I would like to ask about the ecological thing of Bitcoin. Like, do you think that Bitcoin's ecological sustainable? Because I saw a study that shown that one single transaction of Bitcoin spends like the energy to sustain one house and a half for a day. So for each transaction you spend that, I think for a whole economy of Bitcoin, it's like unsustainable. I'd like to think what your opinion about that.
So currently, the short answer is no, and that's why the scalability, when they talk about scalability, the energy consumption is one part of that. So, last year the Bitcoin network used up more energy than the country of Ireland, and that's, given the market cap right now, a very small number of transactions in all of the transactions in the world. So if we want Bitcoin or currencies like these to play, anywhere near close to a role as a lot of state-sponsored currencies, then the energy consumption would be crazy. And that's because the protocol is based on something called proof of work that requires a really intensive computation. Now, there are other experiments going on right now in moving to proof of stake and building out different economic incentive and consensus protocols to be able to achieve consensus on the state of that ledger without having to constantly consume energy to do these computations. So,
last question. No question. Everybody understood and everything.
well, if you have any more, you can come to our longer workshop on Friday and feel free to bombard us with questions there.
And I should be available to ask some questions and even give some fractions of Bitcoins if you want to learn more about the system. I mean, seriously.
I'm very impressed with this crowd.
Thank you for reminding until the end.
Thank you so much.
And thank you as well.